What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson, and the Giants have signed another wide receiver. That's 3 in 24 hours if you're keeping track, but this one, a familiar face. They're bringing back Darius Slayton. We woke up this morning, saw reports that the Falcons were deep in pursuit of Darius Slayton. Sounded like his market was going elsewhere and the price was getting too high. Well, the Giants said, nah, they circled back around and they brought Slayton back at the last minute. Big surprise signing here, and I like it. Alex is a little mixed on it, but taking a look at the contract, which we're going to dive into and discuss, I think it's a pretty good deal here. 2 years, $12 million base value, max value of $16.5 million for Darius Slayton. I like it. I'm excited for Darius Slayton to be back. He's one of those dependable, non-injury prone, smart, good locker room guys that Joe Schoen loves. And I think that's exactly what you need to take from this. This is a Joe Schoen guy right here. I know he's a Gettleman guy that's who drafted him, but he fits the mold of the Joe Schoen player and of the Brian Daboll offense. And I do think that Slayton has a pretty clear role to play here. His chemistry with Daniel Jones is important as well. So there's a lot to really dive into with this signing. I mean, listen, Slayton coming back, I know some fans aren't going to be too crazy about it, but let's go over the pros and cons, Alex. But before we dive into it, make sure to leave a like if you do enjoy this episode and subscribe to the channel if you're new and ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. But without further ado, Alex, how are you feeling after the Darius Slayton re-signing?
Well, you mentioned that I was a little iffy on the deal, but it was really only because I hadn't seen the numbers yet, and the numbers are quite healthy for this contract. And, I thought it would be closer to $10 million per season. I don't know why, but that's kind of what it popped into my head for no apparent reason at all. But the Giants signed him to a pretty good deal. A lot of these contracts are actually incentive-laden deals, which is exactly the route I wanted to take. If you're Joe Schoen and going into a wide receiver market, that's really just not that good overall. But like we said before about Paris Campbell, really, really healthy deal. 1 year, $3 million. It can be worth up to $7 million, but that $4 million differential, he has to have a career season across the board to actually hit those marks, and he gets a $100K bonus for every game played. So not only does he have to be on the football field and playing, he has to produce at a very high level and compared to his own standards to actually get that full value of the contract. Now, when it comes to Darius Slayton, he gets a 2-year deal, $12 million base value with a max value of $16.5 million. So there's $4.5 million there in incentives he needs to hit. And now there's a lot of mouths to feed with Isaiah Hodgins, Paris Campbell, Darren Waller, Daniel Bellinger, Wan'Dale Robinson coming back, maybe an additional receiver at 25 overall. There's going to be a lot of mouths to feed, and it's going to be hard for some of these receivers to actually reach these incentives, which really is in the favor of the Giants and actually helping them keep some of these costs lower. So, what are your thoughts on that? Just the incentives and how healthy these contracts seem to be.
I mean, listen, having too many mouths to feed, too many playmakers to spread the ball to, that's a good problem to have, okay? And I'm not saying that the Giants have some super stacked, crazy wide receiver core with a bunch of talent, but they do have a lot of guys who are going to need the ball. And I think that's important because as the Giants likely moving to a more pass-happy offense, I feel like Daniel Jones, Brian Daboll, Mike Kafka wanted to air the ball out more than they could last year, but offensive line play got in the way, so we'll see if the Giants make any moves to upgrade the offensive line. But also, the lack of receiving talent really got in the way. The Giants just didn't have enough playmakers out there. But now you look at this offense, Darren Waller's going to get the ball a ton. Saquon Barkley still has to get the ball a ton. And you've now got guys like Paris Campbell, Wan'Dale Robinson coming back from injury, and Darius Slayton coming back, who led the team in receiving yards last year. There's a lot of mouths to feed. And again, that's not a bad problem to have. I'm also not saying that the Giants have like multiple all-pro players out there. They don't. But they've got now a solid core, a pretty good group of weapons for Daniel Jones. And this is exactly what we wanted. We wanted to see Daniel Jones get some weapons on this new contract and prove that he was worth the value that the Giants priced him at. So let's see if that's the case. Now, in terms of these contracts, I mean, Joe Schoen is just doing a phenomenal job. Listen, he's getting guys for lower than expected prices. He traded just the 100th overall pick for Darren Waller, which was an absolute steal in my eyes and in the eyes of many. But all of these contracts, even dating back to the Daniel Jones contract, all the way up to the Slayton contract, everything in between, they're so flexible. All of these deals have guaranteed money in places that can be moved around. They can be restructured. Extensions will free up money. That's the thing about Joe Schoen, guys, is that he doesn't want to tie up a ton of money and go all in. It seems like the Giants are going all in right now. Like, that's what it feels like. They made a trade for a superstar tight end. They're adding a bunch of weapons. Like, they're really bolstering this roster for the 2023 season. But I'm not going to say that they're going all in, because all these contracts that they're signing, they have the future in mind. They're not 1 year, big money, high cap hit, fully guaranteed deals. It's nothing like that. In fact, it's a lot of low guarantees and a lot of flexibility in all of these deals. So that's the part of this that's getting me really excited, Alex, is just the way that Joe Schoen has been so careful, so strategic with the money that he's spending. And that is going to open things up to where the Giants can win football games in 2023 without sacrificing their future. This isn't a situation like the Los Angeles Rams, right? Where they traded all of their draft capital, said, screw those picks, took all the players that they could, all these all pros. It's not like that. The Giants are just slowly building a team through free agency, but you know that Joe Schoen's motto is to build through the draft. This is only the start of it, right? He's just putting the roster in position to where they can target a few deep positions in the draft and really build this thing. So I like this, but there is one report that's stemming from this that I think is pretty interesting, Alex, that I want to get your take on. Jordan Rannon of ESPN says, quote, "This now solidifies that the Giants will not be players for Odell Beckham Jr. Put that dream to rest. He is/was out of their price range." End quote. So, Alex, bringing back Darius Slayton, I like it. You like it too, based on the contract and all the numbers in there. But that does take the Giants out of the race for OBJ. What are your thoughts on that?
It's fine. This was always going to be a situation where, I didn't want to overpay for OBJ. It was always going to have to be a good contract. And look, I trust what the Giants are doing because all these moves make really good sense. Like I said before, a lot of them are incentive-based deals. And what seems to be the case is the Giants have now built out the depth of their wide receiver corps. The last remaining piece is the wide receiver one. It's the Hopkins. It's the 25th overall pick, whether that's, Flowers or Jordan Addison or Quentin Johnston, and maybe trade up a couple spots to get the best receiver on the board. If we have a shot at getting one of those guys. This is a really good scenario for the Giants, and I think that now you have a really good wide receiver core from a depth perspective in terms of, you got Paris Campbell, really good slot option, can do some stuff for you, move around. He's, 4.3 speed, incredible guy to have on the roster when healthy. And then you have Sterling Shepard, who's 30 years old, the oldest of the bunch, a holdover from, the Dave Gettleman era, and he obviously has a ton of experience with Daniel Jones. He's an energizer. He's a leader on that team. He's essentially a coach in a player's kind of role. And then you have, Darius Slayton coming back, who's, creates a lot of separation vertically. He can do a lot of stuff with you on the crossing routes and the over routes. He's really opens up opposing defenses and allows you to extrapolate on other players and expand upon their talents. So I definitely think that the Giants are doing a good job in adding pieces that are going to allow them to build on each individual player's strengths. Darren Waller, the versatility he brings, attacking the seams, attacking downfield, getting the ball in space. He can break tackles. He's a big boy. He can dive for those first downs and those touchdowns. Of course, you have other guys on this roster like Isaiah Hodgins, one of our favorite players. And hint, 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 he's going to be coming on the podcast soon. So you heard it here first. He's going to be coming on. Spoke to him yesterday, last night. He's connecting us with the people, and we're going to make it happen for you guys to get some exclusive content from our guy Isaiah Hodgins, who's obviously going to be a big piece of this offense moving forward and has some really good chemistry developing and a really good red zone threat for this Giants team. But to me, it sounds like they just need a wide receiver one, and for what it's worth, OBJ is not a wide receiver one anymore. We can all agree on that. I don't think coming off 2 ACL tears, now that he's 30 plus years old, he is a wide receiver one. He's a great wide receiver two. But we already have a lot of depth, a lot of good receiving talent. And now, Darren Waller could be seen as a wide receiver two, for goodness sake. He basically doesn't play inline tight end anyway. So as Anthony mentioned yesterday. So now the last piece of the puzzle is the big one. It's the big fish. Now's our chance to go catch the shark. We've caught a couple of stripers, caught a couple of smaller fish, got a couple guys who are going to be good complementary pieces and draw some attention, expand the field, allow us to be a little bit more explosive. Darren Waller being a bigger fish, is kind of a bigger fish in a small pond. But now we go after the shark. Now we go after the megalodon. And that's going to be the wide receiver one. And we don't know who that's going to be yet, but it's the last piece of the puzzle. And I think it's going to really revamp this offense. And, Anthony and I were just having this discussion. Do you go wide receiver at 25 or do you go with a cornerback at 25? The Giants could also use a CB2 alongside a Dory Jackson. So maybe you go CB in the first round, or maybe you go and then go receiver in the second round. Maybe you trade the second round pick and you go after a guy like Hopkins. And, obviously you have to take on that big contract. I think the Giants probably want to keep their costs a little bit lower after signing a bunch of these guys. So I'll ask you this, when you're looking at kind of the market right now and we have that last big fish that we need to fill, do you think it happens this offseason? Do you think we kind of roll into this upcoming season with what we got? Maybe add a couple of receivers maybe in the second round. Maybe add a guy like Michael Wilson or Andreas Iosivas. There's a couple of guys in the back end there that could be valuable as depth pieces and maybe some developmental guys. But, as we've seen, we already have a couple of those now. So I guess the question is, are you still thinking wide receiver at 25? Or are you thinking maybe we're looking at quarterback or another piece that may be able to help us at a different position?
So when I said that Joe Shane's setting himself up for the draft through free agency, I think that the Giants are now in a position where they can go best player available at 25, which is exactly what he wanted to do. They're not forced to go wide receiver anymore because they have an abundance of depth now. I mean, look at this receiving core. Darius Slayton, Paris Campbell, Wan'Dale Robinson, Isaiah Hodgins, Sterling Shepard, and Jeff Smith. That's a bunch of starters. And honestly, you're saying like the Giants need to go get that big shark. I don't necessarily agree. I think that they got it, dude. I think that Darren Waller really is that primary receiving threat in this offense. Like, I know traditionally you think of a receiving core that's built out but has one guy that purely stands out, but let's look at Kansas City. Who's that wide receiver over there that stands out? They're going into this year likely with Kadarius Toney as their number one receiver, and they're not worried about it because they have a quarterback that can spread the ball around, A, but also B, because they have Travis Kelce, one of the best receiving tight ends in the NFL. And now the Giants have Darren Waller, and if he stays healthy, they have one of the best receiving tight ends in the NFL. So I don't think they're going the Buffalo Bills model of trying to get a Stephon Diggs to help propel that breakout like for Josh Allen, but for Daniel Jones. I don't think they're necessarily going that route. I think they're going with the Kansas City model. Let's get a dominant tight end and a bunch of capable wide receivers that fit well into the scheme. They don't need to force themselves to draft a wide receiver one. They don't need to trade for a wide receiver one. And in fact, you mentioned some of those guys there, but in round two, a guy like Tank Dell has maybe WR1 potential. So you can go receiver in round two, or you could just take another guy in the middle rounds and add even more depth. But I really like the way that this wide receiver core is built. And I don't think that the Giants, sure, yeah, if Quentin Johnson falls at 25 and the Giants like him, go ahead, take him. Best player available. If you think Jordan Addison is the highest rated player on your board, best player available, take him. It wouldn't hurt to have one of these WR1 draft prospects with that kind of potential and upside. That doesn't hurt you at all. But what will hurt you is if you force the pick. And I think that the Giants are just putting themselves in position where they can go with the best player available. And I think that's really important. And again, like I said, Darren Waller, I mean, last year he played 70% of his snaps out in the slot, and it was 60% in the slot and 20% out wide. He played 20% in line. I mean, that's crazy. He's basically just a ginormous wide receiver at that point. I don't think the Giants utilize him that way, but trust me, he's going to line up out wide and he's going to line up in the slot a whole lot. They're going to get really creative with that because you know who else does that? Travis Kelce. Yes, he plays a lot more in line than Waller, but he also does play a lot outside of the in line. He plays on the slot, he plays out wide. And that's kind of, like I said, the Kansas City model seems to be the way that the Giants are going here. Not the Buffalo Bills model, but the Kansas City model. I think this is really Mike Kafka probably has a lot of say and is giving a lot of strong opinions here as the Giants build out this roster. And I think that's important. Kafka is proving to be one of the brighter minds, one of the brighter young offensive minds of football. He got some serious looks for head coaching jobs. And now it seems like the Giants are building out a roster that perfectly matches what he learned over in Kansas City and what he wants to do here in New York. And I think that's really important. So, Alex, what are your thoughts on that? Going with, instead of the Buffalo Bills model, going with that dominant tight end and a bunch of solid, capable, scheme fit receivers and following that Kansas City model?
Well, I can totally see it, but again, you're expecting, Daniel Jones to play at a very high level. That's what, if you don't have elite receiving talent, you really need your quarterback to elevate everybody, right?
But I'm going to counterpoint. Alex Smith. Alex Smith was really good in that Kansas City model. They didn't have an elite number one receiver. They had a bunch of capable ones. They still had a good tight end.
That's true. That's totally fair. I mean, Travis Kelce is a different beast. Travis Kelce is a different beast. But I'll tell you this: Darren Waller has that capability. The question is, can he stay healthy? If Darren Waller stays healthy, we're in good shape. And I think that you're right. We don't necessarily need that big whale right now immediately. But I think the best take you've had so far is that this sets up the Giants to be in the running for a BPA. This is they can go best player available. It could be a cornerback. It could be an interior offensive line like John Michael Schmitz. It could be an edge rusher for all we know to pair with, Kayvon because Aziz has been kind of unreliable. There are things they can do now that previously, it was wide receiver or bust, but now at least we know we have depth there. We don't need a wide receiver one necessarily because you add a lot of these pieces, but I still think it's probably our biggest need. But I do think that the defense could use a little bit more support. Obviously, retaining most of these guys is a big deal. But I also had a thought before that kind of popped into my head in the sense that these deals, Paris Campbell, Darius Slayton, 1 year and 2 year deals, they actually fit perfectly with what the future of this team looks like, because when the Giants have to pay Andrew Thomas, when they have to pay Dexter Lawrence big money, those contracts will essentially be expiring. Paris Campbell will be gone after this year, so that opens up some cash flow. Saquon's off the books next year, given they don't extend him, which they may still do. Darius Slayton will be off the books in 2 years. So, and that's the fifth-year option for Andrew Thomas in 2024, and Dexter Lawrence obviously in the fifth-year option next year, but they can obviously push some of that money into 2025. So you have a lot of these contracts which are short-term deals that are coming off in the future, and for what it's worth, think about how much sense this makes. These are incentive-laden deals. You can easily move on. Same thing with Darren Waller. And over time, you slowly replace these guys with draft picks that you're developing, right? Wan'Dale Robinson is our long-term slot option that replaces Paris Campbell. That's ultimately what's going to happen. Hodgins, very cheap solution for us for the foreseeable future, most likely. There's going to be a lot more free agent wide receivers next year. So in my opinion, if Hodgins looks good midseason, you extend him midseason. You don't wait for him to hit free agency again. So, they can do that. Obviously drafting is the way to success. Drafting is always going to be the building block of a successful team. And when the Giants are putting themselves in a position where they can draft well and plug a lot of holes and develop a lot of players while also competing with competent, experienced NFL starters like Darius Slayton, like Paris Campbell, like Darren Waller, and all the talent we currently have. So that's a very good strategy, is that we're not signing massive contracts that are going to stop us from playing guys we draft. We're signing contracts that are going to give us the short window that we need to develop our prospects and develop our players to a point where they can compete. Those mid-round picks, those late-round picks that we find really good value in, that just need reps and time, we can now afford to give them that time. There's not a there's not a Dalvin Tomlinson on a 5-year deal. There's not a Leonard Williams on a 4 or 5-year deal that is making $25 million that's standing in the way, and you can't find a way to start a guy because there's, we don't, not to say that would happen, but just more so that there's not big contracts like a Kenny Golladay. Now you don't have those big albatross contracts sitting there and you're like, we have to play this guy because he's making so much. And there's other guys that deserve those reps more. And I appreciate the fact that Joe Schoen said, screw the contract anyway, and started Hodgins over Kenny Golladay because he was a better player for us. You know what I mean? He was like, I don't care how much you're paying. You weren't my free agency signing. I'm starting Hodgins anyway. And I think that's pretty badass, and I respect that move from him. And I think that Joe Schoen is willing to do whatever it takes, and I think he's willing to, eat money just because winning is more important, and pride because of a contract is not going to win you football games in the NFL. You need to play the best players you have, and I think that that's kind of what we're seeing, and I really respect that they've done that so far. So I really like what we're doing, but I do think you're right in the sense that the moves that we've made up to this point really set us up to go best player available, and whether that's receiver, whether that's corner, whether that's edge rusher is yet to be seen. But I do like being in a spot where we can just go with that best player, and we don't have to draft for need.
Yeah, and that's really the beauty of what Joe Schoen's doing right now. They're setting themselves up to go best player available in the draft, and they're also setting themselves up to have the flexibility to really tear things down and start over next offseason if they need to. That's the beauty of what Joe Schoen's doing right now. He's building for right now and for the future. This team looks really solid, and all of these contracts that he's signing, they can be long-term options. There's an option in all of them, because they expire soon, but they can be extended, and they're low cost early on, backloaded, whatever. So they're really smart, clever deals for the New York Giants right now. And so it's got me really excited, not only for this upcoming 2023 season, but for the future. And I'm excited to see Danny Dimes throw some touchdowns to Darius Slayton. But I want to hear from your thoughts down below in the comment section. How do you feel about the Darius Slayton re-signing? And how do you feel about the Giants setting themselves up to go best player available? Let us know down below, and make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this episode, and subscribe to the channel if you are new, and ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. I'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.